Hi guys, and welcome back to the Average Pundits podcast, your home of all things Premier League. Got quite a choosy episode to talk about today, following the Manchester United's 3-1 loss to Crystal Palace on the weekend. We thought there was enough to talk about that game, so we thought we could definitely make an interesting little podcast about it. I wasn't the best pleased with the result. I know Reece is probably a bit more happy with it. But as always, Reece, thank you very much for joining me today to talk about this.
Well, it's a very interesting topic. Those that joined me for the live stream the other day will know that I was quite the happy bunny when the full-time whistle went. I tried to make it as unbiased as I could, cheering for Big Odeon as he came onto the pitch. Didn't really make much of an impact, but there were a lot of things to talk about, a lot of things I noticed from the game, looking through the eyes of a disgruntled United fan, I can definitely see and pick out some points where they need to improve.
Yeah, there were issues all over the park, but no such more issues coming from any other position on the pitch than defence. So I think just briefly touching on the defence whilst we were there, I think it's evident that the centre backs had a rough time. That the whole defence really didn't have the best game. We were kind of screwed over a bit with the second goal. I think do I think it was a penalty? Not at all. Do I think it should have been retaken? Definitely not. So that was a bit tough to take, but whatever. Crystal Palace deserved the win 100%. That was just a bit of the game, which was just a bit more salt in the wound, I think. But we were only saying before this podcast was started recording, you're looking at United's defence now. You've got a 50 million right back when he's fully fit. Obviously, we saw Timothy Fosu-Mensah against Palace, but a 50 million right back when he's fit. You've got an 80 million centre back paired with a 30 million centre back and a 30 million pound left back. Obviously he's been at the club for a while now, but a 30 million pound left back at the time. So you've got a defence just under the 200 million mark, about 190 million, and it's really tough, man. It's really tough, and there are other issues to talk about with the defenders that necessarily weren't on the pitch, so they can't be fully blamed for the result of that outcome, but there are issues at the club regarding some other defenders, which I'll touch on in a bit. But all in all, Lindelof had a mare. He had a real mare, and Maguire had a rough game as well, but Lindelof had a real mare. But like I said, I think he was a bit screwed over with the penalty, but a very, very tough result to take. I don't know what you made of it, Reece.
Well, you mentioned the centre-back partnering, or lack thereof, should I say. Lindelof and Maguire just don't seem like they're on the same wavelength. I've been noticing this ever since the return to the Premier League under lockdown restrictions, and that was the Tottenham game, where Bergwijn seamlessly breezes past Maguire because he's too slow. Maguire is slow. And so, to an extent, so is Lindelof. But I think Lindelof can get off the blocks a bit quicker. But Maguire, when it comes to speed, he has none of it. And I wasn't too sure on the lineups before the game. How come Aaron Wan-Bissaka didn't play? Is he out injured?
I think he just wasn't. I think Ollie just didn't want to fully take the chance with him. I assume there was some kind of knock there, but. It's interesting seeing Fosu-Mensah get some game time. I don't think he's an awful player. I don't really think he's a United player at this moment in time. I think he's probably, that ship sailed now. He had a couple of loans out, so I think his time's probably gone for United. But Diogo Dalot can't seem to get a game anywhere on the pitch. I would have liked to have seen Dalot make an appearance, but apparently that's not part of the plans. Maybe there's something going on which I don't know about, or the fans don't know about anyway. But yeah, Timothy played that game. So when Aaron Wan-Bissaka's back, that's something we've got to look forward to. And there's a couple of things we'll talk about in regards to the left back position to come up a little bit later in this podcast, the things that we've heard through the grapevine. But defensively, that was definitely a place to start. Moving on from that, obviously, Ollie's at the helm, Ollie's at the wheel, and he's got this long contract deal now, and that's happened. He signed the contract, and at the time, obviously, you get a string of results, and he was getting good stuff out of the team, and there was definitely a positive change since Mourinho. And I didn't think he was the right man for a long time, for a long period of time. I think once he got the contract, signed the contract, you got to start, as a fan of that club, you got to start backing the manager from then on. And I don't think he's awful. I really don't think he's awful. I think there are way, way more experienced managers out there, which is a very valid point. I was only talking to someone the other day, and he was saying that Ollie's the worst manager in the league, and I'm thinking, it's your opinion, mate. I don't necessarily wouldn't maybe go that far, considering we finished fourth
There's
last
Dean
season.
Smith on that list.
Yeah, I was going to say, where is Dean Smith on that list?
Oh, that's an atrocious claim.
I wouldn't necessarily go as far to say that. I didn't agree with that point, but I thought there were some definitely managers which are a lot worse on that list, considering we did get Champions League last season.
Yeah, Dean Smith, Scott Parker,
Yeah,
to an extent potentially Frank Lampard.
Lampard, wow.
I mean, like, he's not, he comes from Derby and then he's shipped into Chelsea to try and change the squad. He's done a great job, but I think as experience goes, Ole, they're on a similar level. So he's not exactly, I wouldn't exactly say that he's worse or better.
I wouldn't disagree with that. I think that a lot of the argument from certain people are saying, like, well, when there's managers like Pochettino out there, I think Allegri still isn't tied to a club. There's other big names floating around, and it's just like, well, why aren't you going for that? And I don't want to see managers keep leaving the club. I don't want to see this revolving door thing of, Moyes gone, Van Gaal gone, Mourinho gone. I don't want to see it. It really frustrates me because no manager, they need time to fully integrate their philosophy and get the players they need. And I think Ollie's got the players on his side. I think the players want to play for him. I think they don't like the fact that, well, Ollie doesn't like the fact that he's not getting the backing. But you could argue that exactly the same thing happened under Mourinho. So it's just at the moment it's a waiting game, really, in my opinion.
Yeah. You raised the point about there are managers on the market. And people are saying, oh, well, why wouldn't you go for Pochettino or Allegri? And the point I raise against those fans that say that is that does a Pochettino or an Allegri have the same passion for Manchester United that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer does? A club legend will always have more passion for that team and making it better. Now, that's exactly as we previously mentioned with Chelsea. Frank Lampard has come back and he's done a phenomenal job. He's done an amazing job. And Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, to an extent, with the tools that he's got, with what he's got to deal with, the lack of funding that he's had as well, he's come in and established himself as a manager in this club because he's passionate about it. He wouldn't have got them past PSG in that Champions League if it wasn't for passion. He wouldn't have got them to the Champions League for this season if it wasn't for his passion. So the argument is there for him to stay. And why wouldn't you let him when he has the tools to do it? And he obviously, as you mentioned, has the backing of the players. What does a Pochettino or an Allegri have over Ole Gunnar Solskjaer other than experience that he doesn't already possess for that club?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see the point for that. I think if you sign someone like Pochettino was the name that it wasn't too long ago. Like earlier on when we were doing the average pundits, there was a lot of questions around Ole at the time, and would we see Pochettino coming in, considering he just left his position at Tottenham? And it was something that I think if Ole had to go, that would have been what I would have asked for. If Ole had to go, then it would have been Pochettino for me. And I think he could have come in and he could have brought a very, when he came into Tottenham, he brought this hunger, this new philosophy that Tottenham hadn't seen in a very long time. And he was without a doubt the best thing to happen to Tottenham in decades. He completely brought that team up. And it was that team's performances and that team's run in the Champions League and all of those things which were able to grant them the stadium that they've got now. They've got an absolutely incredible stadium. They owe so much to Mauricio Pochettino, Tottenham. And, as a manager, and I really liked his man management and what he brought to the club. Towards the end, it just got to the stage of Tottenham where I think he lost the dressing room. There were a few other issues going on. As you can see in the Spurs documentary, it's a really good watch. And I wouldn't have been opposed to seeing that at the club. But like I said, the second the good performances start rolling in and the second that the club chose to hire Ole, it's all right, game mode now. It's like, okay, Ole's doing good. I want to start backing the manager. And I think the majority of fans would agree. You have to, whilst the manager's there, it may not be your choice or it may not have been who you want to see there, but you got to back him. Otherwise, it's going to implode. So I'm still for Ole being in. What I want to happen is for the board, and I want, to show a bit of passion and say, look, you've got top four. That's not enough. That's not enough. You spend all this money to get top four, which we did last season. We got top four, and then it gets to a summer, which is crucial. You want to be competing for the title. You want to be competing for the cups and the Champions League and stuff. And where's the passion? Are you really satisfied with another fourth place finish, an early knockout in the Champions League, and no silverware? It's not what you want to see. It's really not what you want to see. I mean, I don't know what it's going to take to change that at the moment, because it's got to come from above.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely does. And we'll get on to the direct, whether there will be a director of football coming soon or what there is around the director of football. But with Ollie, you can sense this frustration there with the lack of spending. Ollie wants to spend. I think it will take a couple years of him just nurturing the squad, because not all teams can just have manager after manager after manager. And that is what's been so unsettling about this United side. And we've said it time and time again. Ollie needs to stay there. Ollie needs to be there for the next 5 or so years. Maybe not 5, because if there's no silverware in the next 5 years, he's gone. Or the next 2 years, he's gone. But, try and aim small for the time being and build the squad up. Although you do have a world-class team, there are pockets that need improving. But this season, you need to establish those areas first. And then next summer will be the biggest summer for Manchester United in recent history anyways. Is Pogba going to stay around? Will the defence finally have, its stability? I think Maguire is a centre-back partner away from having that centre-back partnership. Okay, Lindelof is not the guy for Maguire to be paired with. There needs to be one more reinforcement brought in that centre-back position in order for United to have that stability. And I think Ollie knows that. Ollie is a manager, he knows that. And he's going to try and make something happen with his United team, whether the players, whether the board want it or not. And if they don't agree with him, they're probably going to end up sacking him off, which again is probably the worst thing to do. But again, yeah, you can't afford another fourth place finish. But one season as a fourth place finish, getting another year of Champions League and focusing on trying to get some silverware for the club wouldn't necessarily be the worst thing in the world. I think Ollie's got his priorities straight. It's just whether he needs more from those above. And I think that is one of the topics that we're going to go on to next, which is the director of football. Now, when it comes to Man United, the question of a director of football has been going around for quite some time. Now, we've seen with Ajax and Van der Sar, he's a fantastic director over there. Is there something that needs to be implemented soon for a director of football at Manchester United?
It's something that I'd say is critical, but I don't think it will happen. I honestly do not think it will happen until the ownership changes. And there are clubs with worse ownership than Manchester United. That is one thing I want to go on record saying. I'm not one of those people who sits there and will moan constantly. I want the ownership, all the money. We get millions of pounds. There's millions of pounds. It's just how they run it. That's the problem. There are way worse ran clubs, So at no point would I ever, start crying wolf and say, United are the worst run club in the world. There are worse situations, but it's, the money's not a problem. It's just where it's going and where the focus is being held. And the criticism for years now has been, we've got Ed Woodward at the club who handles all the business, but also oversees the football. And they should be two completely separate entities. And I agree 100%. I mean, you want someone to come in there and assess the situation, black and white, look at what there is on paper and say, right, what can we afford? What do we need to fix? Here are the options for affordability in this bracket, and this bracket for what your current situation is at this given time. Someone who can look at the situation logically and not rush to spending or not trust the wrong people. That's another thing that I want to touch on a bit later as well, is trusting the wrong people at the club and outside of the club. It really is. It seems like simple stuff on paper, and it's the director of football role is something which clubs all across Europe have implemented. It's not as big in the UK, or not as heavily reported on in the UK. There are people which do that job, but just a little bit more, reclusive behind the scenes. So would I like someone to come in and take the reins? Yeah, 100%. And like you mentioned, Van der Sar there. There's like Monchi as well. He's really good. And he did it at Rome. He did it at Sevilla as well, I think. Leipzig have got a great setup. There are clubs all over Europe which are really becoming prominent for having these directors of footballs at the helm. It's something I want to happen at United, but I do not think in any way, shape, or form it's happening anytime soon, because it will be a way to take a power away from the upper elites of the club. That there are so many issues behind what you see on the pitch, and mainly with the wages some of the players are on. Some of the wages, I'm telling you, Reece, is absolutely eye-watering.
Yeah.
Eye-watering. Like I read the other day, and you don't know how true a lot of it is, but you see like Phil Jones 120, Jesse Lingard 100, Smalling 100, Marcus Rojo like 110, and I'm looking at this and I'm thinking these are all players which shouldn't be touching the starting team, let alone the bench. I mean, and it's frustrating to say the least. But I mean, you see these things, and your head instantly jumps. And you're like, oh God, I've seen this now. I'm absolutely fuming, and because obviously no one knows fully. It's always estimated. It's always reported on. No one knows fully the situation. But when you hear stuff like that, you just think you want to get someone in to literally look at the club and say, what on earth is going on, and how can I fix it? That's what's needed.
Definitely. And see, I just thought of this, and everyone over this period has been watching the All or Nothing Spurs documentary, and you sort of get to know Daniel Levy a bit more as a chairman and as the owner of a club. He is a proper Spurs fan. He's so involved with the club, and he loves Spurs as a club. Do you think? Now, this might sound a bit crazy, but take the fact that he's not the best owner in the world. He is great, and he's got one of the most state-of-the-art stadiums in the world, probably the most technologically advanced stadiums in the world. Would you think a owner of Daniel Levy's his sort of philosophy, an owner that loves Manchester United and is passionate about Manchester United and wanting it to succeed, do you think a Daniel Levy type owner would make Manchester United way better?
As a chairman, I mean that's Levy's title. He operates as the chairman, and if that's something, on face, potentially, you saw a lot more of him in the documentary, like you said, which has been interesting to see, because before then you just hear the stories about Levy being like an utter Bond villain, and then you see him more in there, and you do see he is quite involved. But some of the stuff I think was definitely played up for the cameras. I mean, but obviously, it has to be because this is a documentary. So I don't fully like Levy. I think there's stuff that Levy does which is a bit dodgy. I think sometimes his reluctance to spend, or his like, we'll just wait a little bit longer, we'll just squeeze a few more pennies and stuff, can be extremely detrimental, or has been extremely detrimental for Tottenham. They've had a bit more of a, like this summer, they've had a few interesting couple of names coming in through the door. Big GB9 coming back to the club, and obviously Reguilon. Reguilon, a player as well, which, famously United were looking at as well. All came down to clauses and whatnot, and everything is what it is. Again, I can touch on that in a bit.
I prefer not to speak.
But I see what you mean. It's somebody who needs the passion to do well for the club. I think, obviously, just saying that having ex-players fill loads of different roles isn't always the best. They need to be proven. They need to be business savvy, and that's what's so interesting about Edwin van der Sar at Ajax. I think he's done that with a lot of grace. He's handled it quite well, and obviously, I think Ajax was his great footballing love. Obviously, that's where it all kind of started for him. He has a lot of affiliation for Ajax, but he has a lot of passion for United as well. You saw that in how the Donny van der Beek transfer was handled. And he was very humble in his messages online and stuff, and it was a very classy move, I felt. But that's the kind of mold which would be absolutely ideal. But I will repeat myself again, I do not see that happening, because it just means a way in which you can take power away from the people who want the power.
Yeah.
And again, one more time, I do not think Manchester United are the worst run club even in the league. There are way worse situations. But as a United fan, you obviously get frustrated with your club's situation. Just like Liverpool, they get a bit frustrated with FSG, don't they? And it doesn't mean to say that Liverpool are in a bad situation. Liverpool are in a very good situation. But, there's frustrations for every club and how clubs are run. And the United one, I think, is just a lack of ambition at the moment from owners who don't seem to care as much.
Yeah. And because, speaking of the All or Nothing documentary series, there was one on Manchester City, and Sheikh Mansour, is very invested in Manchester City and what they're doing. He met with Pep Guardiola, every summer to discuss the club and everything, and they had, trips out there to, to the, the Middle East. And I think it needs an owner like that, the one that, actually gets along with the manager as well. Like, do you think the owners actually really care what Ole Gunnar Solskjaer gets up to in his spare life?
That's the point. That's a good point to make, because genuinely, what you saw in that documentary with Mansour and Pep, Mansour coming in, obviously, heavily invested into the club and everything. You did that before Pep came in, but him and the owners hiring Pep is ambition. That's a project. That's coming in and thinking, right, look, this is what we want. And the appointment of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer wasn't that same caliber, because he's obviously not the caliber of manager that Pep is. There's the Peps, the Klopps at the moment, to a lesser extent Mourinho, but once upon a time Mourinho, you know what I mean? You bring him in and it's a whole investment. It's a whole, like, okay, this is a project. We want to take the club in this way, and this is the captain that we want to steer the ship, and that's essentially, it could be that maybe that's what was missing, the passion behind it. The Glazers, I don't think, have ever been fully invested in football. They're an American ownership. They're not fully invested in coming and watching the games every week and stuff. They have other businesses. Manchester United are a cash cow. At one point in time, arguably in terms of status now, that title still stands. But at one point in time, without a doubt, the biggest club in football, without a doubt, and one of the most historic clubs in football as well. I mean, it's now that we're, instead of making memories for the future, we're now resorting to the history, and we're saying, it all happened there, and it can happen again, but we just need a bit of ignition, and that's the frustrating thing. But I stand by all of that. I don't think anything's changed with the ownership anytime soon.
I think that I think you can agree, being like us two being back in high school, right? I mean, you being from a different area and stuff. Like, I was terrified being a Liverpool fan, by the United fans, because there was still some celebrating to go. So, you guys have won you guys have won the title, what, 19, 20 times,
20 times.
And we were always behind that because of our rough patch, and it was always 20 times. There you go, bam, stick that on you, yeah. And I think Manchester United are now being caught up by the presence of Liverpool and Manchester City now, and Chelsea even so, to a certain extent as well.
Yeah.
So I think there's going to become a point where Manchester United are in a really, really tough situation, and we could be looking at a really bad dry spell. I would say Tottenham levels, but that implies that Tottenham actually had some success to begin with. But I mean, it maybe reaching Arsenal levels of success, well, lack of success and lack of ambition. Like, Arsenal haven't had a league title in years, in over a decade. They've been close. They've won loads of FA Cups, and I think United are great at winning cups. They won the Europa League, they've won FA Cups, Carabao Cups. They have not done the big one in years. Since Fergie left. So that lack of ambition, that lack of trust in some of the players, some of the management, and definitely the lack of trust in the owners definitely makes Manchester United need to move on fast.
It needs to happen. I mean, it was only the other day we saw Manchester United legend in his own right, and ex-player, ex-left-back Patrice Evra. He posted a pretty damning rant on his Instagram, and I think it was just passion, really. And Patrice Evra is one of those really Marmite figures in football, especially now that he's retired. He's got nothing but time to spend on social media, and some of it is utterly bizarre, I won't lie, but there's no denying the man's passion for United. Even after leaving United, obviously going out and performing, at Juventus, and then going back to Marseille as well, and
West Ham as well,
weirdly, yeah. But obviously, he made many of an appearance after United, but the passion never left, and he was such an important player for us in the time he was there. So it's really humbling to see, that passion's still there from the players. And every club have those kind of caliber of players, but obviously when you're one of the super clubs like United, his position and his words are taken quite strongly whenever he says them. Yeah. And he always talks about, he's pretty, and he's not just someone who I think who blows the horn for United. I think if there's a problem, I think he will talk about it. He's obviously one of United's biggest cheerleaders because he's an ex-player. He's going to be. But if there's an issue, after the Palace game, he was right on it. And then takes it to social media where he's, not in a studio and he's just in front of him and the camera, sat with the United mug in front of him, and there he goes. He just goes off. And one of the most interesting things that he said in it, which, you literally, it's like, okay, wonder what that means, or you don't know what it says, but like he said, like a massive director of football contacted him and said for him to call Matt Judge, which is United's chief negotiator at the club, works very closely with Woodward, telling him to pick up his phone.
Wow.
And I didn't know what to make of that because I thought, what does that really mean? But he said one of Europe's biggest directors of footballs contacted Patrice to tell Matt Judge to pick up his phone. And it's like, but now that obviously Evra's affiliation with the club is done, it's just more of a legend status. Obviously, he doesn't have anything to do with the club on a day-to-day basis, so he is fully free to go and say that. And I don't think he'll be making any appearances on MUTV anytime soon. I don't think he'll be, having too much to do with the United media. I think it will happen again because obviously he's Patrice Evra, he's he's a United hero. But it was very interesting to see that. Very interesting to see. And if him and obviously Roy Keane as well, he's the prime example and he's very damning of the situation. If other ex-pros are following suit and starting to say these things, with a bit of an audience behind them, how long is it before maybe the club gets some kind of message, or how long can they keep the blinkers on and not pay attention to that message? It's interesting.
It is. It is really. And like when you have the passion of those players like Roy Keane, I mean, you see him every pre-match or post-match. Like he wants to. I do actually think he has a passion for wanting to fight David De Gea, or in his words, David De Gea. But I mean, I'm not going to mock too many accents here. But when you have Evra, for those that may not have seen it, briefly sum up what Evra was saying. I mean, it's quite a lengthy video. Briefly sum up what you perceived as a Manchester United fan, Evra's message to Manchester United as a club.
I think it was literally just like I used the term earlier, like an ignition, just a match, just underneath the club, just to be like, look, wake up, okay? Because the fans are going to be fans, aren't they? After every single game of football, if the fans aren't happy, they'll take to platforms like Twitter and Instagram and stuff, and some of it is absolutely toxic, and so they'll go on there and they will absolutely just make a bad name for their club's fans, and they'll just be so deluded in what they say. So much of the real fan opinion is lost amongst all of that social media drivel. And I think he just basically went on there to say, look, it's not just fans who are starting to notice this. It's somebody who knows the club, who's played for the club, who knows what it means to play for the club, who's starting to notice what's happening there. And essentially just kind of being like, wake up, because it's not ideal. And I don't just think it was because we lost 3-1 to Crystal Palace. Obviously, that's, that happened and the result came in. I don't think it's just that. I think it's other things. I think it's the lack of spending. And when the loss could have been attributed to the exact areas where Manchester United need to spend in, then it's the point where it's like, the evidence is in front of you now. And I think that's what he was doing. He was like, okay, look, there's the evidence. These are the reasons. What are you going to do about it? I'm no longer a player. I'm not affiliated with the club. I'm not on the payroll. I'm a fan. And he's a fan with a platform. Mm-hmm. So he's a fan that could, there's no doubt in my mind that the people at the club after will say, did you hear what Patrice Evra said? Because it's exactly the same, and it'll be the same if anyone did it. It'll be the same if like a Gerrard or a Carragher did it about Liverpool, or it'll be the same if John Terry or a Lampard did it about Chelsea. If they weren't affiliated with the club, they're going to hear it. If Drogba launched a massive tirade tomorrow aimed at Chelsea are going to listen to it.
Yeah. So
I feel like I don't think he was out of line to do it. I feel like he was perfectly in his own right as a fan. Whether anything comes of that, I mean, obviously he's literally, like I said, he's a fan now. He's not employed by the club. He's not a higher up. He doesn't have any sway. But if they don't listen to fans, maybe they'll listen to an ex-player. Who knows?
Maybe. I mean, You say that he's got the free reign to go on a rant off, out of the recording studio about Manchester United. At least he's doing it out of studio and not ranting about, that certain David Moyes comment he made on Sky Sports. But that was, I mean, for those that don't know, just go on to YouTube and
Yeah,
search
we say nothing.
Evra David Moyes comment. It was to say that on air, no, but you talk about maybe Evra will never have anything to do with the club ever again, and we always talk about a director of football. I want to put across something to you as a United fan. Something a player like an ex-players union, the directors of football. They get you get you. This is a bit like fantasy build a team here of like ex-United players to help Ollie. It would be like the class in '92 coming back and starting up with United instead of Salford City, but
It would be like assembling the Avengers, mate. It would be like assembling the Avengers.
and
But
so yeah. Anyways, like. Would you the guys that are really passionate about the club, Roy Keane's, your Evers, even if Van der Sar gave up his I mean, he probably wouldn't, but he, say if he came back, or like just some maybe once Wayne Rooney's done, would he want to step into that role, or maybe he would get into coaching, but just a load of really good ex-players to come into a directed group of football to help Ollie and the board stir this ship the right way.
I mean, the idea of it's interesting. I mean, you look at that on face and you think, imagine getting someone like David Beckham involved. Too big, obviously very busy man, isn't he? But someone like David Beckham comes in and he's the one talking to the players. He's the one talking to the people that want to come to the club. And he's like, I'm David Beckham. I did this for this club. I went on to do this for these clubs. I know what it means to grow up here, come through this academy and to wear the shirt. The thought of it is almost fairy tale. It's like, wow, this is incredible, because you're flying the flag for the club and making people want to come there. And in a certain sense, that's like, your Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, your Frank Lampard, your Mikel Arteta's, the players that have played for the club and then go on to manage the club. That's one side of the coin. The other side of it is obviously the realism of it, the experience, and also the other thing that you need a director of football to be is business savvy. You do need them to still have that. You need to have them overseeing the running of the football and make sure that all runs smoothly. But the director of football is, if anyone ever came in, which I, again, don't think it will happen, but if it did, they work in conjunction with whoever's up at the top with them. So Ed and whoever the director of football could be would be working together. So, they need to be cooperative, they need to be business savvy, and they need to be hearing each other out and running the club together. It's an amazing concept, but again, I don't think it will happen. I would rather have some. If I could pick and choose what I'd want someone to come in who, like you said, has the passion. That would be the dream. Has the passion for it, but just someone who wants to come in and just see the club succeed, just see achievement. Because when you've had such a dry spell, you just get hungry for it again, like all clubs do. All clubs go through down periods, and you want nothing more than to see a club just pick up something with meaning again. So that would be the dream. But I mean, there isn't all doom and gloom. Obviously, United did complete the signing of Donny van der Beek, which was not in one of the identified positions that were needed in left back, centre back, and right wing. I assessed this transfer myself, and I honestly view it as a case of, okay, this player has become available. We have very good relationship with the club that he's currently at the moment. We also happen to know the director of football. That's also a very big plus. He's a class player. He's a talented player, and he's only going to go somewhere else. So why don't we go for him? That's what I think happened with that transfer. I think we'll play him. I think he'll be hopefully be very good for us. He came on and scored for us against Palace. He didn't start for us, being like a brand new player. I think they slowly want to put him back in, much like Thiago with Liverpool and Thiago played. But he came on and scored.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a taster of what's to come. Maybe it was a one-off. Maybe it's a taster of what's to come. You can't judge it for now. But I think that was a good signing. But I think it would have been a lot better if we had already had the other things filled up.
Yeah.
So definitely. Was I excited at the time? Yeah, 100%. Great player. Great great story behind him, and he also showed a lot of passion to come to the club and stuff. So I'm all for it. But until these other positions are filled, and also the one that's been leading the headlines, which is obviously no surprise to us, no surprise to anyone who listens to this podcast, no surprise to anyone who follows football at all, is Jadon Sancho to United, which is still an ongoing situation. Will it, won't it happen? If you want to hear our opinions of it, we spoke about that transfer enough. I won't go into too much more detail with it.
You're starting to get a headache because of that transfer.
Transfer headache, mate. But we've had journalists come on and they've given their opinion on it. They've thrown their pence in the ring, and that was a few weeks ago now. But I think a lot of their words are still very true. We can only wait and see for that one. But then that's all the focus where that transfer's been. And then there's two other ones which do need addressing: left back and centre back. And a good, rough ending to where we're heading on this podcast, a good thing to kind of end on is the links at the moment, which we're seeing in the media in the left back position to Alex Telles. The Sergio Reguilon deal fell through buyback clauses for Real Madrid. Apparently that's what United weren't happy to do. Tottenham bagged themselves a great player. Fair enough. And it was good, very, very good business for Tottenham. They needed a good left back. They've got themselves a good left back. Nice business. United miss out. I don't think we were ready to pay that buyback clause. And if that was, it would have, well, not to pay it, to have it in the contract. I think if it was purely for the buyback clause, I do understand it. I don't want to build up a great player. I don't want to have a player have a great season and have Real Madrid buy him back on the cheap a year later. But if that's the case, then okay, who's second on your list? There is no second, or there is no third, or there is no fourth, because you want there to be a list. Where's the list? And it's whenever United aren't in a Champions League spot, or they need to get to a Champions League spot, that you see lists being formed. You see, with the centre backs, it was like Maguire was in the conversation. Koulibaly was probably ungettable at the time, but he was in the conversation. Skriniar was in the conversation. Diaz at Benfica. You see all these names linked to us, and you're thinking, okay, there's a list. I like it. There's a list. If there's not an option A, we've got an option B. We've got a C. We've got a D. And then now a season where we get Champions League football and we need the reinforcements and we need the quality in these positions where we're so lacking, and there doesn't seem to be a list. Doesn't seem to be a list.
No, it's quite shambolic, really. And I think I had similar frustrations when we were linked with Timo Werner. We weren't able to get Timo Werner, and look where we're stuck with Firmino. And I'll leave that for another rant another time, because I don't think I need to get angry on this podcast. This isn't revolved around my anger. It's revolved around the anger of our resident Manchester United fan. But I do completely understand where you're coming from with the sense of they need a shortlist of at least 5 players that you would consider for those positions. I think a manager of Klopp and Guardiola would go to the owners and be like, right, I need this position filled with this quality, with, in this age, around this, get me a short list, and which ones are the most reasonable to get. Yeah. Reguilon fell through. Like you said, who's next? Okay, I can think of two world-class left backs you could bring in. Right, you've mentioned one, Alex Telles, who they are linked with. The other one, Tagliafico, who you've already bought a player from from Ajax. And I mean, I've just thought one off the top of my head. Grimaldo from Benfica, the Spanish left back. 3 world-class left backs that could be on a United shortlist, right? So why isn't there buzz around United signing any other top-class world beater left backs with a bit of promise?
Yeah, well, the way it's going now, I mean, you mentioned the other names there, like Grimaldo and Tagliafico. Those are also names which are potentially gettable. There are great names in the Premier League. Yeah. It's getting them at their clubs. But like you said there, with those 3 players, those players are also potentially achievable.
Yeah, like all of them are. I don't think they'd cost a bag. I mean, they'd be around, if not just lower than Ben Chilwell, who is not by any comparison anywhere near, in my opinion, anywhere near Alex Telles, who is there could be some debate about this, Brazil's best left back, if not Alexandro. That's someone else who you could attempt. I mean, he's not exactly the youngest. He's not the the bounciest spring in football, but he's still a world-class left-back, and as I say, one of Brazil's best. So it's going to have to come to a point where you're shortlisting some players that fit Manchester United. Where, as you keep saying, where's the shortlist?
Well, at the moment, the Tellez link that's coming in right now, heavily reported by Jamie Jackson, a previous guest on the Average Pundits podcast, 20 million euros, might I say, for Alex Tellez. And obviously, I mean, the question is, a 27-year-old, very highly rated player in his league, but in Portugal, and he's been in Portugal for a very long time. And I think a lot of players that come from Portugal tend to do quite well in the Premier League. I think there's quite a few success stories that straight from Portugal to the Prem.
Bruno,
Ronaldo.
Yeah.
But a 27-year-old definitely into the prime of his playing years now, the best years you're going to get out of him. Coming from arguably the biggest club in Portugal, and he seems, from the links that we've been hearing, seems keen to move. If he's a good player, if he can occupy that position well, if he wants to come to the club, if he wants to pay for the club, and he's not just coming for an absolute bag of a fee or a bag of a contract rather, then I'm all for it. That's one of the positions filled. You've still got a natural right winger, and you've still got a natural starting right winger and a centre back, in my opinion, to look for. I mean, and centre backs, the only two names that I've seen floating around with us is Koulibaly, which is also every other club, and I don't think that's going to happen, not now. And Dio Upamecano from Leipzig,
yes,
which is also, quite a challenge to get him. It's tough, man. And I'm sure the more we go on, I think, obviously we've done a United special now, so I think the next few episodes coming out will probably divert attention a little bit to see depends what games we get and everything to talk about with the results. But we will be going more in detail on some other clubs. But any transfers and stuff, we always report them on the social media, so we'll be definitely keeping up to date with it.
Definitely. And just to divert back to United a bit, I mean, there are so many names you can bring out with the Manchester United centre-back positions. Like, Romagnoli is at AC Milan, sorry. He is probably, he could be a fantastic centre-back. You mentioned Ruben Diaz. Would Real Madrid let up on Eder Militao? Or, in fact, if you can't snatch Upamecano from Leipzig, why not go to the other French centre-back in Ibrahima Konate?
Yeah.
So it's all really up in the air as to where United can go from here. And as you mentioned, everyone can get to the transfer news that we try and break on our social media pages, the Average Pundits on Instagram, and at Average Pundits Average on Twitter. So, and where can they go, Joe, to try and get in contact with us to come on the podcast?
If you do want to come on the podcast, and we are very open to it, anyone who is potentially interested, you can get a hold of us at theaveragepundits@outlook.com. Drop us a message on social media as well if you want, but we're always down to have people on, always down to discuss different things. We've got some more exciting stuff in the pipeline. I'm very sure we will have some very interesting episodes coming out very soon. And also, what's your opinion on the United situation? Get involved with us. Let us know. Leave your comments. Leave your suggestions and stuff. We're all down for it. But as always, Reach, thank you very much for joining me this week, buddy.
It was a great topic to see you rant over. And for those that are watching on YouTube, please subscribe. Or those that are watching on Spotify as well and Apple Music, please subscribe to us on YouTube. We are under 20 subscribers away from 100. We're trying to get 100 before the end of 2020. So please, please, please help us achieve the goal by the end of what has seemingly been quite a tough year for everyone. So it would definitely make mine and Joe's year just complete. So please, would you consider subscribing and giving us a follow and a subscribe over on Apple Podcasts and Spotify as well. And Joe, I'll let you have the last say on this topic and send us out.
It's been an interesting one. I've definitely, like Reece said, it's always good to have a little rant, and especially when it's maybe a warranted rant. So thank you very much for watching, guys. Please check out some of the previous stuff if you haven't already. Leave a like and a subscribe, as Reece said, and we will see you next time.